Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I'd like to talk about how to strengthen societal resilience to disinformation. And I'd like to welcome back to talk about this Margaret Millett. Margaret, welcome back.
Hello, Alex. Thank you for having me on the show.
Always great to chat with you. When I came across this topic, you and I have had this conversation before. We even had some of this in some of our joint presentations that we've done over the years. So I knew
Hmm.
get Margaret out to talk about this.
Thank you.
Recently on COE dot int website, I'm not sure if that's a word or an acronym, but I came across this article on how to strengthen societal resilience to disinformation. So my question for you is, mis and disinformation seems to spread faster than truth. So how can an organization and crisis communication management experts address this?
Great questions, Alex. You always have good questions for me. So I think misinformation spreads faster because it's often emotional, and amplified by all that is going on. So we know that, there's so much at our fingertips today, and organizations feel this need to respond with speed, clarity, and credibility. Well, how do you do all that? I think some of it is, again, what is your a single source of truth at that you want to have? So make sure that is it going to be your official website? Is it going to be your crisis page? And then the other thing that I think that people need to keep in mind is, again, time ticks quickly, and all this information is getting out there very fast. So silence allows for false narratives to take hold. So therefore, yes, you want to make sure that you're doing things in a timely manner, but also make sure you're doing it in the right way. So that's what I'm saying. But don't take forever, because I know I've worked with some organizations and it's like they want to make sure that everything's like verified, double verified, triple verified. And sometimes you don't have the time to go do that. Also, remember who your audience is. I've been on some recent discussions where we're talking about, that wasn't the right tone, that wasn't the right language, etc. So I think the other thing is use plain and direct language, forget the technical jargon or legal jargon, and also in this day and age of communicating, make sure that you are using the proper language that you need. For example, we all live in a multicultural world, Alex. So, it can't always be, English. So if you are having something that's happening that's addressing people in other parts of the world, or people who might be using your products and services, you might need to have something in Polish, Swedish and Danish. So just make sure that you are also doing things in the language of those that may be impacted, not necessarily those that were impacted, but whoever is the consumer of something. And then the other thing is again, we live and work in a world that's 24/7, 365. So I always joke that, disasters don't happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So you actually have to have people that are actively monitoring social and digital channels to identify and counter false narratives, all around the clock, Alex,
Mm.
unfortunately.
Well, you've kind of answered like three of the four questions, the
Oh,
questions I
sorry,
was going to
Alex.
ask you. But that's great because I've got other ones.
Okay.
The social media, you talked about, the audience and things. With social media, everybody is your audience now. Gone are the
Yeah,
days where if you had an issue, you're only reaching out to maybe your suppliers or your customers. But now,
right.
everyone.
Yes.
So how do you go about that, knowing that in one communication, I have to address my customers, I have to address my stakeholders, I have to address my suppliers, I have to address people that have probably never even heard of me.
So I think that the communications plan is fascinating in this day and age of 2026, Alex, because what I'm going to say is there's the communication with your staff. Okay, there could be then communication with the board of directors. Then there are clients. Okay, the what I'm going to say, the larger realm of who your you know, offerings might be. Then there are customers. And then I am going to say this, depending on what you do across the globe, what's the preferred channel? Are you an Instagram person, or is it LinkedIn, or is it Twitter? Is it whatever? And so I do think that that needs to get looked at. And then, the other thing is we all can log into, just a website today, and you want to, go buy groceries, Alex, and it'll pop up and say, "Can I help you?" And then we've got the online chat there. And so who's going to be directing that? So I look at it as the communication plan today is probably no longer this thin little binder of just a few things. And I think the other thing is figure out across the globe, what are your top 5 scenarios that you think that you need to be prepared for, and figure out what those are and have them already predefined so that you just need to tweak them as they unfold. Because I've been in this business a long time, as you know, Alex. And, when I say to people, before when I first started my career, I got communicated literally with a physical piece of paper, the memo that hit your inbox, but my inbox was in the mailroom down the hallway. And if it was really important, the mailroom people were running around putting it on your desk. And it's also making sure that, if you're the chief information security officer, that you're communicating to people throughout the course of the year when something's happening, and not all of a sudden because here's a major cybersecurity event and we want you to do something different. And I also think it's important just internally to start and tell people what you're going to be doing so that they know, like, hey, we're not going to be using, we're going to not use Google products, we're going to use Microsoft products or whatever. I think it's really important to get all that stuff out there, and also do these false representations of, communications during your exercises so that your staff gets familiar with what they need to do. Because, you don't always want to be like, let me call Alex, he works in that department. Let me call Alex, because you're going to be busy trying to fight the fire, and then you're going to have all these people pinging you with comments and questions. So I think that is just so important to realize that communication is not just this little box anymore. It's a feather of information that needs to really get looked at.
Yeah, and I think some of the things you mentioned is what is helping contribute to societal, corporate, community resilience. Because take the olden days where
Hmm.
things would be reported on the news station, and if you weren't
Yeah,
watching the news, you didn't know what's going on. But now
right.
you have Amber Alerts that go to every, at least in my province,
Yeah, they go to your phone.
everybody's phone now. So,
Yep.
and I've been on the street where, when walking the dog, where the phone goes off and it's an Amber Alert or some sort of an alert, and you
Hmm.
hear everyone's phone go off, and you'll keep an eye out for such and such pickup truck or whatever,
Yep.
and you see everyone
Yeah,
start
doing
doing this.
this.
It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that never would have happened 20 years ago.
Yeah. I think also people forget to have some of those touch points with their community relations people. I mean, like, here in the United States, and I believe it's the same in Canada, Alex, you do have a dedicated liaison for community service with the fire department and the police department. Always exercise those. And the other thing I tell everybody is a lot of people don't know about, for example, that you should also, here in the United States, if you're in cybersecurity, have a relationship with the law enforcement to find out who the local FBI people are. In Canada, I think the equivalent would be the Canadian Mounted Police. So people don't think about their cybersecurity insurance policies. Those policies are there for a reason. Do you have these discussions with them and or the regulators to find out, what we need to do? Because a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I don't want to call them," I'm like, but I'd rather know that the cybersecurity people are going, the insurance people are going to provide A, B, and C services. And, when the regulated people, I say to people, well, what do the regulators want? Well, I don't know. It's like, well, have you asked them? Well, no, I don't want to ask them. I'm like, well, I'd rather you ask them today than we're in the heat of an event. And this way we know we need to do the following, and we need to do this by 4 p.m. And then tomorrow we need to do the following at 12. And what's the format they want it, and all this stuff. And so I do think it's very important to go look at this and figure out how we can all get together, who is the source of truth. And then also, in this day and age, there are so many things. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to, there's an accident on the highway. You hear that, it's a 20 car pile up, then it's a 200 pile up. And, like, where do you go to get the real source of truth?
Yeah, and all of that contributes to identifying what's truth, what's misinformation, what's disinformation, what's,
Yeah.
who's completely speaking in
Garbage.
tongues,
Yeah.
and and that contributes to the overall resilience as we start learning and building and planning and like you mentioned a whole different thing there, being proactive,
Yeah.
not just sitting there waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. What could be a top 10 concern for somebody in the United States, well, Africa could have another top 10. So just because you work for a global organization, it's not necessarily the same top 10 for each region of the world. And that's why I'm saying think about that. I think the other thing that's really important, Alex, is having service level agreements with your comms department because as I said, comms isn't what it used to be. So who's doing the online? Who's doing the social media? Who's doing the customers? Who's doing the clients? Who's doing the employees? Um, you know, that's not just one team. It is one team, but that's a very specialized skill probably based on, what they're doing. And I think the other thing that they can need to continue to remember is get that memo out or some form of communication, whatever, to the employees to remind them to be mindful of what they say. Because you and I could work in Toronto and go get a Starbucks, and we're coming back in and we're talking in the lobby of a 30-story building in Toronto. We don't want to be notifying the world that something's gone wrong at our organization. And then also on the flip side, they need to remind employees to say, hey, if you're getting inquiries, remember to tell people to send, the emails to info@abccompany.com so that the communication people can start and get that. And again, keep a log of all the types of comms that are coming through because if all of a sudden you're realizing there's new comms coming in, you need to make sure that you know that for future takeaway.
Yeah. And all that will just strengthen the plan, the processes, and the retention, hopefully, the muscle memory when you're exercising all of this. And that'll make things stronger. And
Yeah.
instead of people freaking out because an event has occurred, they'll automatically switch in. I know what to do. I know who's
Yeah.
doing what.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, Alex, is again, making sure that the communications team is always doing the media training with the right people within the organization. Is it, your chief information security officer, your CTO, your HR lead, all the executive committee. But again, if you've got a hotspot in other parts of the world, that head of that country and or region needs to be available to have the capability to go make informed statements on behalf of the organization because it does no good if somebody in New York is trying to make a statement for something that's unfolding in Manila. You know,
Right.
it
Right.
needs to be local.
Any final thoughts you'd like to share on societal resilience and mis and disinformation?
I just think that combating misinformation has to be a core component of organizational resilience. Again, Alex, we talked about how it needs to require the preparation, the speed, the coordination, and the staying trust building before, during, and after a crisis. And that's the beauty of what happens. Of we can look back now to see what's happened at other organizations. It doesn't have to be in your sector. I always say look and see what's happened to other companies because there's always a lesson to be learned. And you too can also make your organization much more resilient by having strong communication plans in place.
And on that note, we've come to the end of the episode. Margaret, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.